We talk a lot about connection, in relationships, but have you ever thought about it as like the core power of the human soul?
Hmm.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into some really fascinating source material that frames connection, or Hitkashrut, I believe is the term,
That's the one. Hitkashrut.
as the very foundation of our vitality.
Yeah, it's described as this, well, indispensable force, really. Our mission today is to unpack how this core power shapes our inner aliveness, you could say,
Inner aliveness, I like that.
and the dynamics of our relationships, even those sort of hidden motivations, the why behind what we do.
Okay.
And understanding these forces, it's not just, academic. The sources suggest it's absolutely crucial for living a balanced, authentic life.
That already brings up a question for me, though. If these forces are unseen, how do we even begin to grasp them?
That's a great question. The source uses a powerful analogy.
Okay.
Imagine your soul, right? As a magnificent building. What
Okay.
gives it stability? What lets it stand firm against shocks?
Okay, like a building.
The sources argue it's the foundation, and that foundation is connection.
Ah, okay. So connection isn't just part of the building, it's the foundation it rests on. We should probably keep that image in mind.
Definitely. Because the text really emphasizes that Hitkashrut is the fundamental power of the soul. Not just a power, but the bedrock.
The bedrock, right. Everything else is built on top of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
It provides the structural integrity for everything else within us.
So going back to the building, if that foundation is weak, the whole structure is unstable.
Precisely. Just like a physical building needs deep, strong foundations to last, the soul relies completely on the strength of its connections.
Right.
A weak foundation, the source says, leads to instability, vulnerability. It's like trying to build on, shifting sand. It doesn't matter how nice the walls look.
Okay, that makes intuitive sense. But
It-
how does this connect to vitality?
Well, this is where it gets really profound. The source directly equates connection with vitality or liveness. The Hebrew term is oyut.
Oyut. Liveness.
Yeah. And the idea is kind of startling, actually. It suggests that if you're not truly connected to something you're doing, you don't truly live it.
Wow. Even if you're actively doing it.
Even then, you could be going through the motions, but if that deep connection isn't there, it lacks the depth of your connection directly maps to the depth of your vitality.
That really reframes things like burnout or just feeling disengaged, doesn't it? It's not just being tired, it's a lack of connection.
It challenges you to ask, is my heart really in this? Am I truly invested?
Yeah.
Or am I just checking a box?
Checking a box versus really inhabiting the experience.
Yeah. And this isn't a new idea. The source quotes this incredibly powerful ancient saying, "Ovruta omituta."
Novrata omituta, what does that mean?
It translates roughly to either companionship or death.
Wow, that's stark.
It is. It really drives home the point that connection isn't just nice to have. It's presented as life itself. Disconnection, on the other hand, leads to a kind of inner dying, a diminishment of that aliveness.
Okay, so connection equals vitality equals life. Disconnection equals the opposite. So how do we actually do connection according to these sources?
Good question. The texts detail 5 primary ways, or maybe modes, of human connection. These are love, fear, or awe.
Awe. Okay, not just fear.
Right. It has that nuance of respect, too. Then there's mercy or compassion, dominance, or victory.
Dominance, victory. That sounds potentially problematic in relationships.
Well, we'll get to that. It's about the balance. And the 5th is gratitude or thanksgiving.
Love, fear, awe, mercy, dominance, victory, gratitude.
Okay. And the crucial thing to understand is that these aren't like separate boxes you pick from. They're described as inherent components within every significant relationship.
Every single one, even say marriage or close friendships, not just like a boss-employee dynamic.
Exactly. Think about a marriage. Obviously, there's love. But the source points out there's also, ideally, a certain awe or deep respect that helps maintain healthy boundaries,
Keeps things from getting messy.
Right. And there absolutely needs to be mercy for when things get tough, compassion.
Definitely.
And yes, sometimes there are moments of dominance or needing to win. Maybe asserting a point strongly in a discussion, hopefully constructively.
Okay, I see how that could fit, if it's not the only mode.
Precisely. And gratitude, of course, is vital. So all 5 are swirling around in there in different proportions at different times.
Okay, and this brings us to the balance idea you mentioned.
Yes, this is where the source says it gets really interesting. It literally calls the balance between these 5 modes the question of questions.
The question of questions, why so critical?
Because an unbalanced system, even one with lots of, say, love, but maybe zero awe or respect, the source suggests it's ultimately destined to fail. It can't sustain itself.
Of a balanced system.
Is presented as potentially eternal, stable, resilient, like that well-founded building.
Can you give an example of imbalance from the source?
Yeah, there are some quite relatable ones. One is the tricky balance between connecting with your spouse versus connecting with your children.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic tension point for many people.
Right. How one can overshadow the other. The source actually mentions a, frankly, disturbing story about a father whose connection with his kids was so intense that his wife apparently demanded he stop talking to them entirely for a while just to rebalance things towards her.
Wow, that's extreme. It shows how connection, even positive connection, can destabilize things if it's out of proportion.
Exactly. It's not that the connection with the children was bad, but the imbalance it created threatened the whole relational system.
So it's not just about having these elements, but having them in the right mix for the specific relationship.
Precisely. And that mix changes. Think about a teacher. The source mentions Rabbi Judah the Prince advising, figuratively, to throw a stick at them, meaning instill some awesome authority.
Right. Establish boundaries, command respect.
But that same level of dominance or fear that might work in a classroom, if that outweighed love and mercy in a marriage, catastrophic.
Completely different context, completely different balance needed. Okay.
So this power of connection, Hitkashrut, it really has two sides to it. There's the power to connect outwardly with others, the companionship, the חברותא, and then there's the power to integrate and balance these 5 modes internally within yourself so you can apply the right mix in each specific interaction.
Connecting outwards and balancing inwards, that second part, the inner balancing act, sounds like it requires a lot of self-awareness.
You nailed it. That's the absolute prerequisite. Before you can even hope to achieve balance, you need deep self-understanding.
So is that where the source guides us next, how to build that awareness?
It is. It lays out this 3-part process for really getting to know your soul's deep powers. It's presented as the grand challenge, really, self-discovery.
Okay, I'm ready. What's step 1?
Step 1 is purely intellectual understanding. First, you just have to grasp what these core powers are.
Like, define them.
You get the definitions down. The source actually lists, I think, 13 core powers. Things like faith, pleasure, will, wisdom, contemplation, the 5 connection modes we discussed, love, fear, mercy, dominance, gratitude, and Hitkashrut itself, the power of connection.
Okay, so know the ingredients list, basically.
Exactly. Know the ingredients. Step 1.
What's step 2?
Step 2 is experiential identification. And this is crucial. It's not enough to just know about love or fear intellectually.
Right.
You have to identify and experience these powers within your own soul. You need to be able to feel them, recognize them when they show up in you.
So find where love actually lives inside me, or where fear manifests.
Precisely. If you can't locate it within yourself, if you can't point to it and say, that's what that feels like, then you can't really work with it effectively.
Yeah.
It remains abstract.
Like knowing the theory of swimming versus actually feeling the water.
Perfect analogy. And that leads directly to step 3.
Okay.
Identifying the root of your actions. This is the deepest, potentially the trickiest part.
The root, meaning the real reason behind why I do things.
Exactly. Learning to discern the true underlying motivations for your actions, your thoughts, your desires. Because surface reasons can be very, very deceiving.
Oh, I can imagine. So you have to ask yourself, why do I really want this? Or why did I really react that way?
Yes. And the source gives some fascinating examples, like that desire to win an argument.
Yeah.
On the surface, it looks like dominance, but the root might actually be a deep fear of losing something you feel is rightfully yours, or fear of being diminished or seen as weak.
Wow. So dominance could be masking fear? That's complex.
Very. Or someone intensely seeking a loving relationship. The surface motivation is love, connection. But the deeper root, it might be a profound fear of loneliness.
That makes sense.
Even seemingly noble actions aren't exempt. The source mentions parents marrying off their children. Love is there, sure, but are there other roots? Maybe societal pressure, or even pragmatic financial reasons like reducing household expenses.
Oof, that requires some brutal honesty with oneself.
It does. But the payoff, according to the source, is immense clarity. Understanding these complex, tangled roots dispels the fog that often clouds our inner world.
Yeah, it's like you said about the building, if the foundation is connection, maybe understanding these roots is like checking the blueprints, seeing what's really holding things up or pulling them down.
That's a good way to put it. Just like a messy room creates mental clutter, not understanding your inner items and where they truly belong leads to confusion and inner turmoil.
Which leads us to why we struggle. Does the source talk about common psychological problems from this perspective?
It does. It suggests that most psychological issues stem from one of two fundamental problems.
Okay.
Either one, a basic lack of awareness of these soul powers in the first place, just ignorance of the inner landscape.
Right. Step 1 and 2 haven't happened.
Or two, for people who do have some awareness, the struggle comes in knowing how to properly channel and balance these powers. Step 3 and beyond.
So why don't more people do this deep self-understanding? It sounds so beneficial. What gets in the way?
Well, the source points out a few key obstacles. The simplest one is just lack of introspection.
Too busy. Not making time.
Yeah, simply not taking the time to pause and think about what's going on inside. We're very externally focused creatures.
True. What else?
A big one is self-deception.
Not wanting to see the less flattering roots.
Exactly. It's human nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't like admitting to negative or, let's say, less than noble motivations. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The source even gives this quite chilling example from Rabbi Dessler. A student of his kept having a recurring dream about harming his own child.
Oh, wow. That's disturbing.
Deeply. But through careful introspection, guided by Rabbi Dessler, the student realized the dream wasn't a literal desire. It was revealing a deeply suppressed feeling of intense frustration and anger,
Okay.
stemming from severe sleep deprivation caused by the child's crying. He loved his child, but he had pushed down the negative feelings so hard they erupted in his dreams.
That's incredible. It shows how we deny parts of ourselves, parts we deem unacceptable, and how they can fester.
Precisely. We compartmentalize, we deny. And the third obstacle mentioned is simply a lack of sensitivity.
Sensitivity, like emotional intelligence.
Sort of, a finer emotional perception. The source notes, interestingly, that women often possess this more naturally, which can aid self-understanding. But for others, it needs active cultivation. It's a skill.
Okay, so lack of time, self-deception, lack of cultivated sensitivity, those are significant hurdles.
They are.
So assuming someone overcomes these and gains awareness, how do they learn to channel and balance these powers? You said it's not like a craft you can just learn from a manual.
Right. It's explicitly described not as a craft, but as a wisdom.
Wisdom, not a craft. What's the difference?
A craft has fixed rules, procedures. You follow the steps, you get the result. Wisdom, in this context, is dynamic, intuitive. It shifts constantly based on the immediate circumstances, your inner state, the person you're interacting with.
So there's no formula for apply X amount of love and Y amount of awe.
Absolutely not. It's about developing an inner feel, an intuitive compass, rather than relying on a rigid map. It's learned through practice, reflection, paying attention.
So what's the practical starting point? How do you cultivate this wisdom?
The advice is actually remarkably simple, almost deceptively so. Dedicate just 5 minutes a day to introspection.
Just 5 minutes.
Just 5 minutes. In that time, try to identify one inner power that feels dominant right then. Ask yourself, what is its root? What is its nature? Just observe it, understand it.
That sounds manageable. Even just naming it and exploring its source seems like a big step.
It is. Starts building that muscle of self-awareness and intuitive understanding.
Right.
Consistency over intensity.
Okay. Now, there was another really interesting concept you mentioned earlier from the source. Closing the loop of powers. What's that about?
Ah, yes. This is fascinating. The idea is that when a soul power is activated or expressed, say, you feel a surge of love or anger or even just strong will towards something. That power needs to be, in a sense, completed or closed or calmed once its purpose is served. It needs to return to a state of rest.
What happens if it's left open? If the loop isn't closed?
It accumulates. It creates this internal restlessness, a lack of inner peace. The source compares it to, imagine starting dozens of tasks but never finishing any.
Right. Your mental desktop is cluttered with open windows. It's draining, anxiety-provoking.
Exactly that feeling. An accumulation of unclosed inner energies leads to internal static and agitation.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But then, what about powers that you can't express? Good, positive forces or desires that just have nowhere to go.
Now you're hitting on one of the most challenging but also most profound teachings in the source.
Yeah.
What do you do with powerful, legitimate inner forces, say? A strong desire to achieve something or help someone or create something, but external circumstances, limitations, lack of opportunity. They just prevent it. There's no vessel for its expression.
Right. That sounds incredibly frustrating, like having all this energy bottled up.
It can be. And the source says that true wisdom, real inner mastery, lies in identifying these powerful but currently unexercisable forces.
Oh, okay.
And instead of falling into despair or letting that energy curdle into frustration or resentment,
That's the alternative.
you consciously practice what the source calls canceling one's will before God's will.
Canceling your will. What does that mean practically? Give up.
Not exactly giving up on the desire itself, but releasing the demand for its immediate external expression. It means acknowledging the power within you, honoring it, but consciously deciding not to let it explode outwardly or inwardly in frustration because the path isn't open right now.
So you contain it.
Yes. You return that energy to an internal latent state. You hold it, as the source says, in its sheath, like a sword you choose not to draw because now isn't the time.
Wow. That requires immense inner strength, acceptance, patience.
Immense strength and acceptance. It's about aligning your immediate will with the reality of the present moment without denying the validity of the inner force itself. It prevents that inner explosion of frustration.
That's a very advanced concept.
Yeah.
Let's maybe bring it down to a more everyday level. The source used desire, ta'ava, as an example, right?
Yes, ta'ava. It's a great case study for this kind of inner discernment.
So how does this play out? Let's say I feel a pull towards the kitchen, towards snacking. How do I apply these ideas?
Okay, first step, according to the source, is differentiate. Is this true physical hunger, a need for fuel, or is it ta'ava, a desire maybe triggered by boredom, stress, habit?
That distinction itself requires awareness. Sometimes it's hard to tell.
It is subtle, yes.
Mm.
That's part of the practice.
Yeah.
But let's say you recognize it. Okay, I ate an hour ago. This isn't hunger. This is ta'ava.
Right. Step one, identification. What next?
Once identified, you have strategies. If it's true hunger, the answer is simple. Eat what your body needs.
Okay.
If it's desire, ta'ava, now you manage it consciously. One strategy is distraction. Are you bored? Maybe listen to music, call a friend, engage in a hobby, redirect the energy.
Makes sense. Distraction works sometimes. What else?
Another approach is separating quantity from quality, or taste. The source gives this example. Maybe you crave the taste of something sweet.
Yeah, that specific flavor.
So, perhaps having one small piece of candy, really savoring the taste, satisfies that specific sensory desire without triggering the larger desire, the ta'ava, to eat the whole bag. You give the desire a small, controlled outlet.
Ah, so you acknowledge the desire, give it a tiny bit, but you stay in control.
Exactly. And the crucial element underlying all this, the source stresses, is setting an inner boundary. Deciding consciously, okay, up to this point, I will allow this desire. Beyond this point, I engage my willpower.
And that boundary is personal.
Completely unique to the individual in the situation. It's not a rigid rule, but a conscious internal negotiation based on self-awareness.
This has been, wow, a really deep exploration. We started with connection, Hitkashrut, as this foundational power.
The bedrock of the soul's building, linked directly to our vitality, our vayut.
Right. Then we looked at those 5 facets: love, fear, awe, mercy, dominance, gratitude, and how crucial the balance between them is.
The question of questions. An unbalanced system is unstable.
And then the journey into self-awareness. The 3 steps: intellectual grasp, experiential identification.
And the really deep work of uncovering the true roots of our actions and desires, cutting through self-deception.
Which helps us understand why we struggle and how channeling these powers is more of an intuitive wisdom than a rigid craft.
Learning to close the loop on activated powers, and even how to consciously contain those powerful desires that can't currently be expressed, holding them in the sheath.
It really feels like we've sketched out a path toward, well, greater inner clarity and peace.
That's precisely the goal described in the source. By understanding these inner mechanics, discerning the roots, achieving balance, you bring order to the inner chaos. You strengthen the soul's foundation.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about drawn from the source. This whole process, identifying forces, finding roots, balancing, containing, it's described as beginning to clarify your world.
Clarify your world.
Yeah. So the question for you, the listener, is what might your world, your inner building, start to look like if you committed, maybe even just those 5 minutes a day, to this deeper kind of self-awareness? What new levels of clarity, stability, and maybe even peace might you uncover when you start to truly understand the foundations of your own vitality?